Here we go.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Journey into Comics with your hosts, Nate Phillips and Brandon Stone.
I am a god, you dull creature.
Hey everybody, and welcome to a very special episode of Journey into Comics with me, your co-host Brando, and Nate is not here right now. If you haven't noticed, he did a minisode right before the ghost hunting episode, and he announced that we're going to be trying to something a little bit different. And what we're going to do with this, and let me just kind of explain about what's up with all these minisodes, is that we really enjoy bringing you guys like content every week in October. It seemed to go over really well with our listeners. I almost said viewers, but you guys don't view it. You listen to it. And so we kind of want to keep with that. And with the holidays coming up, it's going to be even more difficult for us to make time to meet up with each other. You know, we got family and travel and hopefully not too much snow. We do live in the Midwest, but the minisodes serve as sort of a way of just getting content to you, having maybe a little bit of a shorter episode for you guys to digest, and maybe just to get to know the co-hosts a little bit with maybe some more story, aspects instead of a lot of like us just discussing what's going on in comics or, and for me, mainly games. And I kind of want to discuss that just for a really, just for like a minute second to get into the minutia, if you will, of my aspect of the podcast. And sometimes I kind of feel like I am the ears of the listener who may not know everything there is to know about comics, because I certainly don't. Nate invited me to come on to the podcast because me and him share obviously this background of like being friends and in a band, but he's a collector of comics and I became a collector of games. And so we decided to get together and talk about that. And then he just invited me to stay on because we had such a blast doing it, and I did. And I got to say, doing this podcast has kind of reinvigorated my interest in comics, as well as, the movies. I've said that before in this podcast several times, that my interest in the movies really waned in the past couple of years, especially after Iron Man 2 and I can't remember if there's another one, but really going to see the new X-Men movie this year, Days of Future Past. I really enjoyed that. That series really, took some shots with me, and I didn't like where it went. Anyways, so one thing I did notice when listening to the podcast before I came on is Nate did talk about comics, but he kind of brushed on some TV, some Doctor Who, some Walking Dead, some games, and we talk about all this other random nerdy stuff, and so I kind of want to be that person for the podcast. I'll let him do the hardcore comic stuff, and I'll kind of fill in some other stuff, and maybe my own perspective, maybe someone who's not into the collecting perspective. But anywho, none of my rambling here. This is my first solo podcast, by the way, so just kind of stay with me. I may just go on tangents because I tend to do that. But that's what's up with these minisodes. And my minisodes, and I went into my video game stuff and other stuff just to kind of tell you that I'm probably not going to be talking a whole lot about comics on a comic podcast. My side of it is more video game collecting, so I want to be focusing mainly on video games. Going forward, with these minisodes, I've actually invited a few friends of mine to come on and basically have a special episode just all about gaming. And these guys are some guys I talk to on a daily basis. We have a lot of funny conversations. We have interesting conversations. And I really want to capture that and bring that to you guys. And, I wish Nick could be here for that, because that would be really funny to get his take on some of that. But I think it kind of works better to kind of do it when we have time to do it, because sometimes me and Nate have some trouble lining up our schedules because of my work schedule, his work schedule, and all the other stuff that kind of comes in between. So that's what's up with all these minisodes, and that took about 4 minutes to explain. I just want to take another shot before I get started with all this to thank everybody who's listened to the show. We hit over 1,500 plays. And he started back in January and then had like a 3-month hiatus with all the weather, and then did some other episodes. And then I came in June, and it is just such an amazing feeling to watch that play count go up and know that you guys are listening. You guys are digging it. I've helped spread the show. Nate's helped spread the show, and it just keeps growing. And I want to thank everybody who checks us out on Podbean, iTunes, however you download it. I want to thank everybody on Facebook, or anybody who checks out our Instagram, which has been very, very, very poorly utilized. I really apologize for that because I'm a part of that as well. And also on our YouTube, I created a YouTube channel to just talk about some stuff and some extra, almost kind of like a supplemental thing. And we talked about it. I made some videos. Nate hasn't done so yet. He's made a few videos. He's trying to get everything kind of figured out on his end because he doesn't really have a camera. He's got his iPad. And so he's going to be figuring that kind of out. But I've got some videos coming up. So the Journey into Comics YouTube channel, I've got a couple of gaming pickup videos. I'm about ready to shoot another one right after I recorded this podcast because I had a huge month in October. I mentioned that on the podcast, I think it was 2 episodes ago now, where we talked about how I got a really good deal on some NES stuff. And then the one before that, the I Am Taco iteration of the Baller Minutia Saga. I pretty much went through all of the NES games that I got on that day. But I've gotten actually more games since then. October was pretty game crazy for me collecting. Please excuse me, by the way. I'm enjoying a nice can of Mellow Yellow. Haven't had that in a long time. But yeah, they kind of come in like this 16 fluid ounce can now. Like for like $1 or whatever. I picked it up. And so may have a little bit of burbation going on. Burpation. So I want to thank everybody who supports us. Check out the YouTube. We're going to be doing a lot of stuff there. Another thing that I wanted to talk about really, really, really quick is the giveaway. We gave away, finally, after hitting 200 likes on Facebook, we gave away the Comic-Con cover variant for The Walking Dead 129. And we did that live on the podcast. And I was so glad to finally give that thing away. Because when we announced it right after Comic-Con. And our likes were going through the roof. We were getting like after like after like. And it just kind of slowed down. And I was wondering when we were actually going to be able to give this thing away. And if it would still be even relevant by the time we gave it away. Whether or not like Walking Dead would still actually be a comic by the time we gave this thing away. But I'm really glad to have seen that. And I'm glad that we got to do that. We got to get the other prize, the autographed picture of Mr. I Am Taco himself, Wesley, and get that done. So hopefully we can do that maybe whenever we all meet and get together. We'll pump the air mattress back up and recreate the I Am Taco picture. So let's just get into some games, man. Let's get into some conversation. Nate kind of did something called his gaming journey, and it was kind of cool because he's really the comic guy of like the podcast, but yet he is into some games. So he was kind of talking about the first chapter, if you will, of his gaming journey, I guess, journey into gaming. But mine is different. Mine's really different because I actually have vivid memories of the very first video game I remember ever playing, and it wasn't Mario, it wasn't the NES, it was the ColecoVision, and it was Smurf Return to Gargamel's Castle, and it was like a side-scroller platformer where you just kind of jumped and did this stuff. I have very vivid memories of playing that, and that being my first video gaming experience. Now, by the time I played it, of course, the ColecoVision had been out for quite some time, and I think whoever owned it, they didn't have a Nintendo or whatever, because I know that was around at that time. It just matches up with however old I was, because the Nintendo, the Nintendo came out in like 85, so this had to be in the very, very late 80s. It was a very early memory. And people have asked me, actually, if I ever have any thoughts of collecting Atari 2600, and honestly, I really don't. I never really played an Atari. In any of the iterations of Atari, I never played much of them. But I would make an exception to get into ColecoVision just for that nostalgic feel. Because I remember playing the ColecoVision, but I don't remember what it was like to play a ColecoVision, if that makes any sense. After that, though, it was straight to the NES. And honestly, before just a few weeks ago, I've never owned an NES. I had family members that had them. I had friends that had them. And that's how I played it. It wasn't something that I got to play a lot. But for the NES, man, all the games. I mean, Super Mario Brothers, Duck Hunt, Mega Man, Castlevania, Zelda. All of these games that just started on that console. And one of the first ones that I remember ever playing was Duck Hunt because of the Zapper. I mean, they marketed that system so well to be more of a toy instead of a gaming system. And that Zapper gun works for that gimmick. And I just remember having so much fun at friends' houses playing Duck Hunt for just hours. And that stupid ass dog. I had a funny conversation with Nick, one of the guys I want to have on one of my minisodes here as I move the microphone, get a little more comfortable, to elaborate into this dog situation. We likened him to, Charlie Manson. Yes, the dog from Duck Hunt is almost like the Nintendo version of Charlie Manson. Think about that. And basically how he came about this is that he convinces you to kill all these ducks for him. Because he looks so happy when you kill one. And when you don't kill one, he laughs at you. He mocks you. He makes you want to try harder. Or shoot him, which you ironically can't do. But you keep trying to kill all these ducks for him. So, is he the Charlie Manson of the NES? Or is he just some stupid dog that you can finally beat the crap out of in Super Smash Brothers? It's like a Melillo. But I just wanted to share that story. Oh, real quick, and I know Nick's getting a real laugh out of that. He does listen to the podcast. Hi, Nick. I'm not going to get you this time, I swear. But also, I one of the games that really stands out to me on the NES, obviously, of course, you have the Mario series. I'm not going to go into that too much. But the Mega Mans. If there was ever a game that made you ever want to pull your hair out because of the difficulty, it was Mega Man. Because not only was it a platformer, but you had to shoot these dang things, enemies, before they freaking killed you. And it was so unforgiving. You had to be right on with your platforming. And I love this to this day. I love Mega Man. And I actually don't own one. But now, since I've started collecting NES, I do plan on acquiring some Mega Man's games, especially Mega Man 2. That was the one I played the most back then. For some reason, that was just the one that I played. But the NES really paved the way for me to liking gaming, to get into it. And it was the Zapper, it was the controller. I didn't mess with the dancing pad too much, or that power pad, I think it was called. But just the addiction of like Super Mario Brothers, trying to go through those levels, trying to beat that game. Super Mario Brothers 3 is one of the greatest games ever made. I will argue that to the end of the day. Super Mario Brothers 3 is the greatest Mario game ever made, and arguably one of the greatest games of all time. Now, if you want to argue like greatest Mario game, some people might say Super Mario World. And I love that game. That was the game I got with my Super Nintendo. But Super Mario Brothers 3 introduced so many different things. They introduced the ability to choose your level. That was the first time in a Mario game that you went from Mario game, you went from World 1-1 to World 1-2. You went through all these levels to get to the final world of World 8 and defeat Bowser. You save the princess. Now you can choose your path a little bit. You can go off the beaten path. You can go to this bonus stage. You can actually skip stages entirely. And they also allowed you to be able to like store power-ups. How cool is that? I mean, and in Super Mario World you can do that too, but you can only use one. I mean, like have pages of them. Of mushrooms, flowers, stars, whatever you want. Even whistles. The whistles were a really cool thing because they allowed you to just power through that game if you knew where to get them. Introduce secrets. I don't know why I went off on that tangent, but Super Mario Bros. 3 was one of the early games that I consider to be awesome. With just the gameplay was right, the it's almost like the open world of that time period of going around like this with the world map, kind of like a board game. Move your pieces around. So, I really love that. I really love the NES. And I when I first started collecting, NES was not really on my radar. And I'm not really too sure why. Maybe it was because it's been so long, I'm a little bit disconnected with it. But I enjoy so much now that I actually have some games. I think I've got over 22 or however many games, 21 games. And to plug those in and play those, it's amazing. I'm afraid that I'm getting addicted to the collecting aspect, and I'm not sure how much Nate could actually, adhere to that. But I kind of feel like that maybe I will have, a big, massive collection of just stuff because I'm like, I want it all. But I don't really, I actually have a set amount of games that I want for each system. I need to sit down and honestly get a complete compiled list of that. But I'm having so much fun with this NES. It's not even funny. And to the same token, a little bit, the Sega Genesis. I still have my just Sega Genesis that my grandma bought me back in the day. And I just recently got back into that. And I've noticed I'm pausing a lot. I'm sorry. I'm trying to collect my thoughts and not do too many ums and ahs and all that stuff. This is my first solo cast, so please laugh away. Which I know Nate is doing right now. But anyway, I broke my Sega Genesis RF cable because it's all I had for that at the time. I broke it, and for a good few months, I wasn't able to play my Sega Genesis, so I wasn't actively buying games for it, and now I can. And so, when I go to the stores, when I go to my, my local areas that I go and hunt, it seems like I have a lot more to look at now because I was having things that I wasn't looking at before. I was focusing on the PS1, PS2, Xbox, or I was Super Nintendo. Now I can focus on Nintendo, Genesis, Super Nintendo, all these different cartridge-based systems. And I feel like my wallet's going to hate me for it by the end of the day. So, again, this whole chapter 1, I guess, of my video game timeline, I was just going to end it with the NES. I went off into the Genesis, and I guess I'll just kind of go on elaborate it, maybe have something more to talk about. The Sega Genesis, I never actually had that many games for the Genesis, because I had Sonic, I had NBA Jam, and stuff like that. And one of the other main games that I had for that system was called RoboCop vs. the Terminator. It's a side-scroller shooter. And it was also released on the Super Nintendo, but one of the things about that time is it's a little bit different from now. But the Genesis and the Super Nintendo were competitors, and you can put them together, and a game would be released on the Super Nintendo. The same game would be released on the Sega Genesis, but they would be actually two different versions of that same game, simply because the Super Nintendo could do this better, or the Genesis could do that better. And so, when the first time I played, another great example was the game Aladdin, Disney's Aladdin. The Super Nintendo game is entirely different. The Genesis game is more of an action platformer, whereas the other, the prior, the Super Nintendo is actually more just a platformer. And for RoboCop vs. the Terminator, it's the same. I put so many hours into that. Very graphic, very violent. And when I got that, I do, remember wanting more games for it. But at the same time, me and my friends, Super Nintendo was so big. And we kind of had this Super Nintendo trading ring, if you will. It's like we all ended up managing to get different games. So that's how we all played the games, is that we would borrow them from each other. And so with the Genesis, I didn't have that. And so my experience with the Genesis was a lot less until recently. I've been able to play a lot more, and really, it's almost like I'm exploring it for the first time. However, with the Super Nintendo, I know what to expect. I played a lot of Super Nintendo. I have a lot more games that I can go and collect that I already know are good, and I have to do less research on. Now, I'm going to close out this whole video game timeline thing with the Super Nintendo, because as a kid, that was the system. That was the system that's the first video game system I ever owned. My parents bought me that one. and it came with a Super Mario World, as I said. And I remember playing Super Mario World so much and loving it, and I still love it, as I said. But then I remember getting Home Alone 2, which kind of a just ridiculously difficult game. Doesn't really resemble the movie much at all. And then getting my third game, which I got for Christmas, and that was Street Fighter 2. That system, to me, is the birth of my gaming addiction, or collecting, if you will, because ironically enough, that is the system that sparked my collecting back up over a year ago. I found my Super Nintendo, and I had Star Fox still plugged right into it. And I'm like, I want to play this so bad. Star Fox was awesome. And I played it. And then I bought some more games. And I said, you know what? This is part of my childhood. I want my kids to experience that when I have them. And I want to be able to have, just some Super Nintendo games laying around, for stuff that, you just don't see around anymore. And to me, it's a little bit better than emulation. I did get into emulation at one point, but, having it in your hands, having the controller, having the system, it's all just a little bit more inclusive. It's all a little bit more of an experience. And that grew into what it is now. And I now have over 400 games spanning across different systems. I went crazy with it. But Super Nintendo, when I owned it as a kid, I borrowed Zelda, Link to the Past. I borrowed Maximum Carnage. I borrowed Street Fighter 2 Turbo, which I didn't have. I had the original. When Turbo adds in all the boss characters you fight, Balrog, Vegas, Sagat, and of course Bison. And Turtles in Time. I borrowed the hell out of Turtles in Time. That is a game I'm still on the lookout for. Rob kind of swept that up when we went game hunting, and I'm glad he got it. I really am, because he's collecting, but not as intense, and so I'm really glad that he's able to get that. I'm not holding any grudges over that one, really. It would have been nice to get it, though, because I love that game. But I remember playing Star Fox before I owned it, because I did end up owning that one. And just being blown away by the graphics. And that's so funny to say, because that game, it used the FX chip, and it's not really 3D, but they used it looks like early 3D in a way. How they have the ship and how they have everything sort of rendered. And I was blown away by that game. And it's ironic that game and that experience of playing that for the first time again got me back into what I'm doing now. So, having a little swig of Mellow Yellow here, I'm almost out. So that is part one of my gaming timeline, with a couple of random stories thrown in. Moving forward with, my little mini-sode, I do want to mention this game. It just came out, and it is an exclusive game, and it is Bayonetta 2 for the Wii U. Kind of interesting, because Bayonetta 1 was never on my radar. I remember seeing it. I remember hearing about it. It was made by Platinum Games. And when the news broke that Bayonetta 2 was going to be exclusive to the Wii U, I didn't really think much of it. Until the third-party exclusives, which are pretty much non-existent, the third-party games in general started dwindling from the Wii U. You're not getting your Call of Duties anymore, or your Assassin's Creeds. Those will no longer be coming out for the Wii U. They're pretty much leaving it high and dry. And a lot of that is Nintendo's fault, and that's a discussion for maybe another minisode or whatever. But what's cool about Bayonetta 2 is that it's getting so many high scores, across the board. Everyone's loving this game, and that is only great news for Nintendo and for the ability to create a great game with a great single player experience, because multiplayer is running rampant now. As a single player gamer myself, it's so sad to see that go. But I will be picking up Bayonetta 2. And for those of you who don't know, Bayonetta 2 actually comes with a Wii U port of the original Bayonetta. So now you can get both, and it's also on a physical copy. So you can get both games now on the Wii U for $60. And that is not a bad deal, especially when Bayonetta 2 is getting reviews throughout the score. It's one of the perfect scores that came out for GameSpot. GameSpot gave it a perfect score. And that has me interested. It really does. If you like the fast, action-paced gaming, from what I understand, you're going to absolutely love this. And for the Wii U to get a title like this, it's really cool because I kind of feel like the Wii U is going to be one of those systems, like, 10 years down the road, that is going to be very collectible because nobody really gave a crap about it. I love my Wii U, and admittedly, I don't play it a lot. But I'm so glad that they're able to get a game like Bayonetta 2 and have it be getting so much acclaim. Apparently, only one other game that came out this year has scored higher among the reviewers, and that was The Last of Us Remastered, which is, to me, kind of funny because The Last of Us came out on the PS3, and the remastered version is still beating out all these newer games that came out. Titanfall, Destiny, Sunset Overdrive. I don't know, actually. I really can't elaborate on what Sunset Overdrive has scored, but I haven't heard anything about what it scored. Whereas on the other games, I would hear about it. So, maybe I'm wrong on that, but I'm very excited to check out Bayonetta 2 this Christmas. I will be picking it up, and I'll actually let you guys know how I personally feel about it now that I've mentioned it. And this thing's kind of moving along. I kind of chit-chat a little bit, and I'm going to end this minisode, if you will, on kind of a somber note. And it's not really how I want to do it, but that's the way it's going to be, because as some of you have known, maybe if you listen to the podcast, both me and Nate, I believe Nate did, pre-ordered the Hulkamania edition for WWE 2K15. And the wrestling games for me have been almost a separate addiction. Every year, it seems like I always say, you know what, I think this is the last one that I need to buy. It has everything that I want. It has a great roster, has a great deep create for wrestlers, arenas, everything. And I don't need to get the next one. And then they announce the next one. And then I curse them because now I have to buy it. And it was the same way with this year. Excuse me, Mellow Yellow. Because they announced Sting was going to be in the game. Now, Sting has never been in a game before. He's never actually appeared on WWE television, ever. And to have him in the game was really cool. However, it has been announced that for the PS4 version, which is what me and Nate were both getting it on, there's been some cutbacks for the game. There's been some cutbacks with the Creation Suite, which is honestly, it is the reason why I buy these games. Almost, it's like I spend more time doing creative stuff than I do actually, playing the game. And they've lowered the created wrestler slot down to 25. Now it's, maybe I can get away with that. Maybe I can, I know you're thinking, Brandon, you really create that many guys? And yeah, I do. I create guys from other feds. I create my own people. I use these games. I'm such a wrestling fan that I use these games to create what's in my head. And I feel like I'm being limited now. So that is a big thing, right? Against me. Another thing is that they took out the custom music option that was added into the PS3 edition. I know the Xbox version of the WWE games had it before the PS3, and I'm not sure if the Xbox One actually has the custom music. I would think maybe they would, because they actually have their own integrated system with that. Whereas with the PS4, we finally just got the ability to do that with the USB stick, where you can play music in the background and all that stuff. I can understand that a little bit, but since they put that in, wouldn't you think that they'd be able to have you utilize that? I don't know. I know the roster's small. I've heard that. A lot of the custom entrances, like you have fewer options. Like you can't even choose the Undertaker's entrance. I mean, this is just what I'm hearing. I don't have the game, so I don't know. But I mean, really? I mean, I understand. I'm not going to create a guy, who in a serious manner that has the Undertaker's entrance. But come on, where's the fun in not letting you be able to use that? There's a few others too that apparently that you can't use as well. And they've also changed like the whole online and how many things you can upload, how many things you can download per day. I am just so disappointed with all these things I'm hearing, and the gameplay looks great, man. It actually does. They actually, they've reanimated stuff. They've, I know Cesaro went down and captured stuff. I know Sami Zayn went down and captured stuff. Like, his finisher, or one of his finishers, that little dive through the turnbuckle thing that he does. And I got to be honest, I canceled my pre-order. The Hulkamania edition was $100. It came with a lot of extra stuff. It came with Hulk Hogan, Hollywood Hogan, it's almost kind of like a pop vinyl figure, but it's different. They came with, an autographed picture of Hogan. It came with some stills from Hogan and Sting. It came with a piece of a ring mat from the night after WrestleMania or whatever. And honestly, I feel like $100 is too much for this game. With all the stuff that they're taking out. Now, I understand you get to look at this. This is the first game truly built under the 2K banner. So there's going to be some hiccups. There's going to, hopefully next year's will be better. And I probably will end up buying this game down the line, but not for $100. That other stuff is not worth that extra $40 that I'm going to be throwing at them for making this game that I've been looking forward to, and they've stripped it down. One of the big pluses is that this is the last, probably going to be the last game that has CM Punk in it. He has a really big role into the rivalry mode with John Cena. He's very prominently featured. So for that, I probably will pick it up down the line, but not at launch, not for $100, not for them sort of taking out all this stuff that I've been looking forward to. And that's that. That was, I was thinking about it last night, and because I just did this last night. I just logged in and canceled my pre-order on Amazon. It killed me to hear all the stuff that they've taken out. They did put in a new Superstar editor that allows you to you make even more detailed edits to the people, but I've heard a rumor that takes up a creation spot for your creator wrestler. Where does that make sense, man? And it is very somber. It is very depressing to me because I love these games. As much as I hate to admit it, it's almost like a friend of mine. He likes the first-person shooter genre, and he finds himself always buying the Call of Duties every year, playing them for a while, and then getting tired of them and selling them. And every year, he kind of talks up, saying, "Yeah, I'm not buying it this year." But lo and behold, a couple weeks or a week after it comes out, he's got the new Call of Duty, and he's telling me, what, it's actually not that bad. And for the very first time, I may be skipping this one entirely, because I did say that I might get it, but I'm not excited about it. Let's put it that way. I may get it just to check out some of these new modes that they've included, but for that reason alone, it's not going to be a $60 game to me. That same day Dragon Age comes out, GTA 5 on PS4 comes out. I can buy those two games, spend an extra $20 over what I was going to spend for that $100 Hulkamania edition, and be a lot more satisfied. And one of those games I've played through already on the PS3. That's sad, man. That is really sad. Anyway, I guess that may conclude my little mini-sode here. It didn't really go as long as I thought it was. I actually got to my points a little bit quicker and didn't have as many tangents. Nate actually went a little bit longer with his mini-sode. But, I will say that I'm getting ready to film a pickup video here on YouTube for all the games that I've bought in October, which is looking to be about 50 games. I haven't bought that many games in a month since I started collecting. Now, granted, 2 of those games I did buy today, and today's November 1st. And there goes my freaking furnace telling me that I need to shut the hell up, wrap up this little segment. and just wish you guys a good one. And I hope you guys enjoyed my minisode. And take it easy.